Well, Fáilte Galéir, welcome everybody. Today we have the pleasure of not just the company of editor Pat+Jude, but of ex-Belfast man Gabriel McCafferty, currently residing, as some of you will know, in Ottawa in Canada, at the heart of government. And he's going to tell us all about how Mark Carney stymied Trump's ambitions to take over the country. But first, Pat, let's talk very briefly about the local elections in Britain, in England and Wales, and what it means for. It looks like the people who are going to be really suffering are the Conservatives. Did you say so?
Yeah, I've been watching it this morning, and I'm not, an expert in British politics, but I was just sitting watching it. And Nigel Farage is claiming that this is a breakthrough moment, and I think he's right this time. He's claimed that before, but they won the by-election and Runcorn by 6 votes. Now that's for an MP, but the local elections they are now clearly outgunning the Tories big time. And Farage this morning saying we are now the opposite. He says first we came for the Tories and we have now toppled them. And he says next on our list is the Labour Party. But the point about this, the Reform is pretty much a right wing party. It's gone. No, I heard Ed Davey of the Lib Dems saying that all during the election campaigns up and down the country, they never mentioned Trump or Musk or anything like that. But he says, I noticed the minute the polls closed, he says Farage is boasting about he's going to bring Trump style politics to Britain and so on and so on.
Hmm.
But no, what really the big point about it all is that the Tories under Kemi Badenoch seem to almost have imploded. But hey, Jude, I love and Gabriel, I love one thing. Apparently, earlier this week, Kemi Badenoch said it was ridiculous that the Labour Party was so out of control that they appointed a Barder Sar who lives in Finland. And Starmer got up and says, I would like to point out the Barder Sar was appointed by the Tory government in 2019, and he lives in Finland. So, in other words, by the way, she's arrogant and she says she never makes a gaffe, so she doesn't need to check things. Well, somebody fed her the wrong information there. But anyway, the whole thing, what I'm saying, Gabriel's a Belfast man, and I'm sure he lived through all the Labour and Tories, all the days. But it looks like it's no longer a two-party state in Britain.
Well, that's if it stays that way, Pat. But don't forget that Farage also led the Brexit Party, or was one a prominent member,
Yeah,
and was howling about Freedom Day in 2016. But we know how that went. I mean, it went nowhere. Where is the Brexit Party today? It doesn't really exist, does it? So
yeah,
I would suspect that the Reform UK Party that he's now crowing over will also fade like snow. Maybe not like snow off a ditch, but it'll fade, I think. The Tories have been around for hundreds of years. I don't think they're going
yeah.
to just step aside and let the likes of your man
But
just
you can
walk in.
also want a little racist thing here.
Of course.
I think quite about middle class Tory voters, the old duffers in the clubs.
Hmm.
They watched the Tory party when the old colonels and the old judges were used to be the white Conservative Party. They've been led by what do you call the wee guy, Rishi Sunak, and now Kemi Badenoch. And I'm sort of wondering all that old boys, with the cigars and their brandies and the clubs saying, "Oh, what's happening in our country?" I think reformists struck a chord in a way that the Tories have lost.
Well, I can't believe that the people would elect a party led by Farage twice, with the Brexit Party, and then that was a really good experience for the last number of years. What is it now? 9 years. And now they've elected him again, and he's going to do great things. I think you'd be surprised the Tories will be able to adapt, and they read the signs of the times. And like other parties, they'll sort of glory in the fact we're not, conservatives in the sense of being racially prejudiced. Look, we've
Yeah,
got our leader has got a brown skin, so they very often parade these people as being a sign of their virtue rather than any sign
yeah.
of their weakening. What have you any thoughts on it yourself, Gabriel, or is it too far away?
Um, Obviously, it's not part of my daily political reading, but I did do some reading this morning. I did see the by-election results and the council election results, which I thought were even more dramatic. Um, but it's very sad. Someone who comes from a progressive community that went through lots of struggle from 1968 onwards, and I'm old enough to have remembered being there with the students in Belfast, the People's Democracy, right through the early years of August 69 and internment and Bloody Sunday. And, I'm very proud to come from a progressive community. And when I see what's happening in Britain and when I see the British working class abandon the Labour Party and vote for either the Tories and now for the extremists in the Reform Party, the very people, when they were UKIP, that brought the Brexit disaster to the United Kingdom, are now poised maybe to be part of the next government, if not a majority government, under Farage, who's a total another charlatan. And I also suspect, and what I have read, is that there's a lot of American money being put into Europe, not just into Britain and into reform, but also into Ireland and in some of the more reactionary and more right-wing extremists there, like the big protest march that they had last weekend. And it's very, very disconcerting and it's very sad. And in fact, it makes me happy to see what Canada did do earlier this week, in
Well,
that despite all the media support for a Trumpist populist candidate, Canada actually stood firm for something much more democratic.
uh-huh. I think I'll make a quick parallel and then we'll go on to the situation in Canada. I think there's a parallel maybe between Farage and Trump. Obviously, they're both right wingers. They all both promise the moon and the stars. I think people have voted, English people, British people in England and Wales have voted for Farage because they can't see anything better. They know that the Tories give them a rough time for the last 13 years or something, and they know that Keir Starmer is really pretty middle of the road to right wing. So
Yeah.
what they're saying is maybe God Farage might get us out of it. And he's a jokey guy and he's alive and so on. Very similar to Trump if you stop to think about it. Um,
Yeah. By the way, can I just change another subject? And because the big time, we want to discuss the Canada thing because I think that's a really interesting one.
yeah.
But one final thing I must ask: what do you make of Micheál Martin's criticism of Kneecap, or joining in of the criticism of Kneecap?
Oh, pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. I think it's a disgrace. I really think it's a disgrace that what the equation is on the one hand, Kneecap's words from, as they say, clipped out of hundreds of concerts and
Mhm.
paraded as being something awful. And meanwhile, on the other side of the equation, you have hundreds, thousands of children, women, babies being peeled off barbed wire. And they're as if 15 medical workers shot dead and their ambulance buried. And Israel getting away with all that. And Micheál Martin saying he's right behind Israel. I think that's shameful. Absolutely shameful. What would your own thoughts on it be? I guess you're familiar with the kneecap controversy, or are you, Gabriel?
Quite familiar. And by the way, we have an Irish film festival every year here in Ottawa, and the Kneecap movie was one of the highlights of the Irish Film Festival here for the Irish in the diaspora. Just thought I'd share that with you. And Kneecap is very popular here amongst the Irish in the diaspora. And yes, they may have said a few ill-chosen words, not unlike some words that have been mentioned many times in Parliament and outside Parliament by Tory MPs about the likes of Jeremy Corbyn, etc. So Kneecap said a few ill-chosen, hurty words, but like Pat, uh, much as I may have found their words maybe not the most appropriate, nonetheless, they are artists and they believe in the freedom of speech to criticize, and artists criticize very, very uh, fanciful terms. I'm much more outraged at the 50,000 women and children that have been massacred in Israel by British supplied armaments, by American supplied armaments. And let me not distinguish or maybe unable to distinguish between hurtful words and the massacre of 50,000 people.
Aye.
Absolutely.
It's
Couldn't agree
Gabriel,
more.
it's a false equivalency. In fact, it's a ridiculous equivalency that Micheál Martin, a couple of weeks back, the 15, as Jude pointed out, the 15 medical people executed, and then their bodies buried, and I don't think he said as much about that as he did about and the full outrage about Kneecap. Now, Kneecap, I think the words were ill chosen. But if
Jesus, Pat,
anybody's going to get that outraged,
they're a punk band. They're going to say stuff.
yeah, exactly. That's the point. They're getting excited about this. So, and obviously, it's the old Jewish lobby or Israeli lobby out there going trolling through everything they can find, and like they're professional smear artists, and that's a fact. And then it's accepted even in Hollywood. You say anything about the Israeli lobby or Apex on you, the Democrat Party. Somebody was on the other day, and he says you get primaried. The minute you criticize Israel, you get primaried in the American politics, and they have bought, and that's a fact. It's open ended. I don't think it's even anyone to try and turn around and say it's anti-Semitic. They have bought influence right, left, and centre. That's
Uh-huh.
fact. It's not opinion, and it's not anti-Jewish. It's
Well,
fact.
we'll just say a word or two more, and then we'll move to Canada. Do you think that this incident, this effort to deplatform Kneecap, will actually damage them, or will, as some people say, they quote the figures from Spotify, where there were 100,000 hits prior to this, and now it's something like 2 million hits, and
Yeah.
everybody throughout the world virtually knows about Kneecap. So, do you think, Pat, that it'll do them damage in the long run, or do them
Jude,
enable?
Sharon Osbourne, who's in, the one who started all this, said they should be denied a visa to work in America. Apparently, their work visa has been denied, so they'll probably never. Well, they certainly won't play it when the Jewish lobby are still in control. So I think their long-term prospects in America are a bit slight. But the rest of the world, I'd say it's gone viral, absolutely. And I think they'll be big heroes in a lot of places. Massive Attack, who are a very well-known group, have come out big time in support of them, as have quite a few other artists as well. So, no, it was just I thought I was actually disappointed. I've not discussed it. Michael Martin jumping on this particular bandwagon. I thought, you know, uh, so much has happened. 50,000 dead. 2.3 million people denied water, food, electricity for 3 months almost. 110,000 injured. And he joins a sort of the establishment in Israel and Britain because a group from West Belfast, a punk band, and that's all he's got to do. He just should have shut up.
I couldn't agree more. Well, anything else you'd like to say, Gabriel, on that topic?
Yeah, your question at the start of this topic was, do we think it would have lost any support for Kneecap? And I think actually it brings to mind the quote by Oscar Wilde, which is, the only bad publicity is an obituary. And they're certainly not writing the obituary for Kneecap. I think, in fact, their support and their popular support will grow, but they may and indeed will be banned from presence in certain concerts and festivals. I can see that. And that says more about the people who organize those festivals than it does about Kneecap. When they're talking about banning and cancelling Kneecap from places, and Glastonbury is being talked about at the moment as a potential ban, I would like to know, how come Israel, with its IDF members, is still participating in the Eurovision Song Contest and not banned? How come they're still participating in the World Cup and not banned, when all those fit, athletic young men are members of the IDF and most likely participants in war crimes as defined by the International Court of Justice at The Hague? This just blows my mind.
I think the obvious course for Ireland, the south of Ireland, is to simply not take part in Eurovision, not take part in the World Cup if necessary. Any competition that Israel is in, I mean, if you look at it, you have to speak out. You have to do something to show your disgust with what's going on. And you're not going to get a representative talk from Micheál Martin or any of the, or Simon Harris either. You simply have to do something. And I think the only way to do it is for countries of principle, states of principle, to simply say, we're not going to take part in any organized contest, song contest, football contest, that involves Israel. They really should do that.
But Jude, when you keep in mind too, Michael Martin has turned a blind eye to a lot of stuff Israel is doing in the sense of uh, what a lot of stuff America's doing, like American planes landing in Shannon, bringing stuff, arms and armaments over to Israel. Turning a blind eye to rendition when flights came into Shannon, didn't check the planes were there guns and stuff on board, etc., etc., etc. But he comes out and has a go at Kneecap.
Yeah, disgusting. Okay, well, listen, let's move to Canada, so to speak,
There's Canada now.
and talk about the election there. Obviously, we're delighted, and I suspect you are too, that Mark Carney did as well as he did, and that he won, even he didn't get a majority overall, that he won, and the fact that he stood up to Trump paid off, as it were. Could you tell me this, Gabriel? To what extent was he successful and was his party successful because he was in opposition and stood up to Trump? Or was it their policies and other things in the background that were helped them?
Uh, Policy of the political parties in terms of social and economic plans post-election had very little to do with this election. This election pivoted totally shortly after Justin Trudeau resigned as Prime Minister, and then we had Mark Carney came forward as the interim Prime Minister in a internal Liberal Party vote. He got elected as their leader, but of course he was without a seat, and he called an election very quickly, and he did a couple of things very quickly. We have a thing in Canada called the carbon tax, basically a plan to try and decrease the amount of carbon in the atmosphere by putting taxes on, petrol and such like. There was a balance against it in that elderly people and people with lower incomes were given a quarterly payment of a few $100s to offset the impact of the carbon tax. And that was overlooked a lot by the opponents of the carbon tax, but nonetheless, it was part of the system. All that to say, we had a pivotal moment when Trudeau resigned. He had become unpopular. He had been suffered unrelenting attack by Pierre Poilievre for 2 years of a full election-style campaign, heavily financed internally and we believe some externally. Mark Carney came forward, and just at that time, Trump started his nonsense about Canada becoming a 51st state and attacking Canada as almost an adversary instead of as a friend and ally, which has been the traditional role of Canada with the US, forever. Well, certainly since the War of 1812. It's not exactly forever. But the attacks in Canada created a pivotal moment amongst Canadians and amongst their mindset of defending their sovereignty and looking to who would be the best person, the best candidate to defend that sovereignty. And Poilievre had already blown it by that stage because he had already allied himself over the last couple of years with many of the Trumpist type politics.
He's the leader of the Conservative Party, the other party.
He's the leader of the Conservative Party. And we had here in Ottawa 3 years ago in January, we had a huge Trump-style protest where a lot of truckers from across Canada came into our city, occupied the entire downtown of our city and multiple streets. You couldn't get anywhere near Parliament. You couldn't get anywhere near some of the shopping areas in the downtown core. And they blocked it for 30 days plus a day, a month and a day. And in the end, Trudeau had to enact the Emergency Powers Act to give the police some more powers to clear these people off the streets. The occupation was extremely unpopular with Ottawa citizens. And during the occupation, Pierre Poilievre went out and consorted and cajoled with these people. Now, I must tell you, some of these people, and this is very important, they weren't Canadians. Some of them came in from the US. They were waving. There's a flag called the Gadsden flag, which is a yellow flag with a snake on it, which says, "Don't tread on me." It's a flag of an extreme right-wing Minutemen type of armed threat to democracy. They waved Confederate flags. I think you're very familiar with the Confederate flag and what it stands for. And they waved American flags. And they also waved, and I have photographs, or there have been photographs that can show this, swastikas. And these are the people that Pierre Poilievre brought coffee and donuts to and was supportive of. people in Ottawa did not forget this. So even in his own riding, which was a safe Conservative seat, he was beaten by over 4,000 votes by Bruce Fanjoy, who was never active in political life before. So there was a pivotal turn during the election. Trump caused it, and the election was entirely about Canada's sovereignty.
But Gabriel, was it not a case that around about March when Trump started referring to Trudeau as Governor Trudeau, and that he was going to take Canada would be lucky to be the 51st state. Our friend Pierre Poilievre, he stood back and said nothing. He did nothing. He stayed silent. And this is the Canadians getting insulted right, left, and centre. But then out comes Carney, and the thing that I think I'm impressed on this side of the pond, I don't know what about in Canada. He was so calm, so measured, and not in the least rattled. He says, we can give ourselves a lot more than the Americans can take off us, from us. And, and that sort of thing, they can rattle their chains as much as they like, but we're not budging. And I think that sort of calm thing that, and as well as that, he just came across as sort of a leader. Poilievre, he just seems to have disappeared. All this sort of populist rhetoric that Orban, Trump, Boris Johnson. I think people want to go back a wee bit now. I think they've had enough of this.
Yeah. Could I ask you, Gabriel, could you tell us why were these people occupying Ottawa? What was their complaint?
Two reasons. The major ostensible reason, as I said, 3 years ago in January, was against the COVID restrictions, wearing masks, having to not attend meetings of more than 3 people, the usual thing which you all experienced in Ireland. And yes, there was resentment and anger against that, but more than that, these people had other agendas, as has been shown in courts ever since, as their leaders have been brought through the court system. Their leadership was very closely tied to the MAGA Trump people in the USA. They had MAGA money behind them. They were actually attempting to disrupt and overthrow many of the mechanisms of normal everyday life in Canada. They were a people inspired by the idea that political change could be accelerated by their protest activity. It's very simple.
Yeah, it sounds as if they were right-wing and were they anti-vax as well as being anti restrictions that COVID was imposed on everyone everywhere.
Anti-COVID, anti-vax, and as you know, that's a growing movement in North America. And now we're paying the consequences. We have measles outbreaks, which have now actually come to Ottawa. We had our first 2 confirmed cases yesterday, which we haven't had measles in North America in this level for like decades. But the anti-vax crowd aren't driven by science. They're driven by ideology. And one of the things that happened in this election and what happened to motivate the trucker protest was extreme ideology, extreme right-wing ideology. And we've missed a bullet in Canada. We've defeated it for now, but it hasn't gone away.
It's very similar in Ireland, I think. You saw that, Pat, that procession, was it last weekend in O'Connell Street with these taking Ireland back?
There's one in Letterkenny, actually, just up the road from me tomorrow. And I think that Clown McGregor is the main attraction. One of the guys who were organising it was on the local radio the other day, and he says it's not racist. Well, I would love to know tomorrow morning how many people will be bussed in to sort of support this rally. And Jude, it is, as Gabriel says, it hasn't gone away. It is a growing thing. Robert F. Kennedy is saying now that autism is this thing. There's a link between this and vaccinations and in kids, and what do you call it? And he doesn't know any adult who has autism and so on. Well, let me tell you something. I have a son who's got a Asperger syndrome, and he's in his 40s now, and it hasn't gone away. So he's talking absolute bullshit. Measles are, as Gabriel says, are on the grow again. And maybe in another year or two's time, when people start dying like 16th century peasants from various diseases that were almost gone, Jude, that's crazy stuff. Some of the stuff that these people are coming out with, it's almost like deny education, deny medicine, deny science. The next thing we'll hear that the earth is flat.
Yeah, but they must believe this stuff, and they must feel that they've nowhere to turn. See, I would agree with you in all the things you say, and Gabriel as well. This notion of anti-vax and restrictions of COVID and so on. Of course, you've got to have these bloody things if you're going to control a terrible epidemic like the pandemic, like the COVID. But I have a feeling that these are people who feel sort of lost. That they don't trust experts. They don't trust the establishment, and they manage to get people who tell them, "I'll take you. I'll lead you out. I'll be a fresh
Yeah.
leader." Like Conor McGregor. I could swear,
Yeah,
John.
Jude,
I could start swearing for the
how
next
does
5 minutes about Conor McGregor on his own. He really, really
yeah.
annoys me.
But here's the point. How do they like Trump's a moron? He's an absolute moron. And have you watched his recent speeches? They are moronic. I mean moronic. He's some of the stuff he's saying is he said he's got a simple thing. Here's a simple one. He said he's got a deal for tariffs with 200 countries. There's only 197 countries in the world for starters. So he's done a deal with 3 countries that don't exist.
Mm.
Right. And you see some of the stuff he's saying about the first 100 days. And what do you call his attorney general, Pam Bondi, or whatever you call it? Mr. President, you've done more in your first 100 days than any president in the history of the United States. And you're going, for fuck's sake, would you get a life? And you sit and watch it and you go, the Americans are lapping this up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you see, the Irish people are also lapping up Conor McGregor. I just cringe when I see
Are they?
a man who basically looks deeply, deeply stupid. That's the long and short of it.
Yeah.
Very strong, I grant you. I wouldn't want to be in a cage with him and have to fight with him. But that doesn't mean he's anything to lead anybody anywhere good.
Yeah. Uh, but Gabriel, one question. Back on some of Jude said earlier on. See, in about March, the Tories or Conservatives were 20 point in the lead, and they were almost certain to get victory. Yet I just read a wee bit the other day, 72% of the people, I think it's maybe under 35, voted for Carney. So in other words, it's the young people who actually came back to the Liberal Party, not the older people. What's that about?
Um, I'm not sure about the data. I've looked at some data myself, and uh, there's a couple of things seem to be undisputed, which are females or women voted more for Liberal and for Carney than they did for
Yeah.
the Tories. Young people, some of them in some surveys seem to have voted for the Conservatives. It was the over 55s that really swung very aggressively away from conservatism towards the Liberal Party in the last couple of weeks of the election. I voted myself in what we had as advanced polls, 4 days of voting a couple of weeks ago, and the lineups were massive. I never saw anything like it before, and there were mainly people of my age and our generation. And I was thinking to myself, well, depending on who these people vote for, that's who's going to win the election. And as it turned out, and when the advanced polls were counted, turned out they were mainly voting for Liberals.
Do you know what the percentage was in terms of people voting generally, Gabriel, by any chance?
You mean the poll turnout?
The percentage of the population, the voting population that turned out on the day.
Sorry, I don't have that data point,
Just
but
interesting.
it was one of the highest ever, Pat. That's all I can say, Jude. It was one of the highest ever.
What the Liberals got 168 seats. They need 172 to form a majority. So what are they going to do there, Gabriel? What do you call it? The why do I keep calling them Tories? The Conservatives got 144, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, your numbers are. I thought it was 169. It might be 168 with count revisions.
No, I think I'm pretty certain it's 168, but I'm not going to argue with you.
No, I believe you. 168 is 4 short. The 7 or 8 members of the NDP will probably support. So the majority will be actually probably stronger than it was before. Don't forget the 22 bloc Quebecois vote
Yeah.
seats will not very much support anything the Tories are trying to do in terms of disruption to the Parliament. They will bide their time, and they will only vote on issues that are important to Quebec sovereignty. They will not bring a government down for other reasons. So I think
Yeah.
that the narrowness of the minority government doesn't tell the whole story.
There was a great jubilation, I think, here, and I'm sure in Canada too, when Mark Carney stood up to Trump and said, he could react the same way. And he's clearly a hugely popular figure because he took the Liberal Party and he swung them around. He saved their neck. But there's two things. One is Trump never had any other job before he became a politician. He was a bloody, a TV
I'm a
star.
state mogul, Jude.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh, and actually, Mark Carney never had a job in politics until now. And I was looking at him, and in ways, he's very impressive. You said, Pat, about him being cool, measured, informed. And I think that's a
Yeah.
great strength, and he's been the governor of the Bank of England and he's the governor of the Bank of Canada. But I was listening to his speech, and to be honest with you, it is dry. He
Mm.
has a certain dryness to him. Uh, and I'm wondering if that'll come back and be a difficulty for him and his party eventually.
I'm never as concerned about the personality of these people as I am about the programs and policies that they want to implement.
But I think
And
a lot, sorry, Gabriel, I think an awful lot of people did vote for and certainly approved of Carney for just that personality he had. And
yeah, 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 yeah. Sure, sure. I accept that, Jude. But I'm saying that in the long term of a parliament, which could be 4 to 5 years,
yeah.
I think it's the programs that and policies that Carney will implement, which will be his historical stamp.
Uh-huh.
And I never forget, given his two roles as a bank governor and given his corporate life as a senior executive, given his connections to the World Economic Forum, I think really Carney represents the WEF and European Union collaboration of standing up to Trump. I think he represents more than Canada right now. I think he's actually now a leading voice for that particular collaboration. And I think you'll see some of the programs and policies implemented will flow from that.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to rock the boat too much. I don't think we're going to see radical change, but I do think that the steady hand on the tiller is what Canadians wanted through the current crisis.
Have the members, any of the people from the NDP, the New Democratic Party, said anything about his victory and how they feel about him? Because they would be to the left of him, wouldn't they?
The NDP has had a terrible election. Jagmeet Singh, who was the leader, who I've met a few times, just didn't catch the passion of the Canadian population in the way that some of his predecessors had. The leading NDP person over this last period didn't even stand for re-election. That's Charlie Angus, who I know quite well. He was the MP for a long time for Northern Ontario. And by the way, Northern Ontario has a constituency. You could put about 6 Irelands into it. It's
I know.
absolutely enormous and huge. I think maybe Charlie maybe got fed up of having to tour around
Yeah.
the constituency so often.
Yeah, well,
But
you're living in the second biggest country in the world.
it's people that come over. I've had a lot of friends over from Ireland, and we've done like day trips to Toronto. And when they realise that Toronto is a 450-kilometre drive in one direction and 450 back again, and they think you do this as a day trip, and say, yeah, why not? The highway's there for it,
Mm.
Yeah, I
It's
remember.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, well, I was thinking, like, I think, Gabriel, if you boil it right down, Trump is the person that was the catalyst for Carney's victory, without question. When he introduced them, tariffs on steel and aluminium and whatever hell, lumber, wasn't it? And he basically said Canada was a resource-rich dependency, and it'd be better off as a 51st state and all the insults right, left, and center. And by the way, geez, when you think about it, this is a guy says he wants to take over the Panama Canal, wants to take over Greenland, wants to take over Canada. And I was watching a wee bit, and I can't remember which of the channels this morning was, grazing, and this is nobody in the Republican Party right now can afford to stand up to Trump. And you're going, Jesus, wait a minute, where's America's democracy gone? He's running right over the courts. He's running right over the news agencies. He's running riot in regard to immigration. They arrested a judge for harboring somebody. In other words, FBI agents come into court to arrest somebody, and they arrested the judge.
Yeah.
You're
We're
going,
living we're
like,
living
is
in
this
a
America?
difficult time under Trump's chaos and madness. But I would say to people, look back to the 50s and to the McCarthy era. I
Yeah,
think we're in a fever era, the Trump fever, and it's similar to the McCarthy fever. But when the McCarthy fever broke, the people who were behind him and who were supporting him all fled like rats from a sinking ship. And I absolutely, totally believe that the Trump fever will break.
Will you give us a date,
I
Gabriel?
wish.
I would tend to agree with you. I have suspicion, that things will get so bad in the States that it could well be that Trump will not, let alone not will he not go for re-election in 2028, but he may not even see 2028. Um, if you look at the ratings for him, I think they're lower than they've ever been. Now, I'm not sure if it's lower for him than it's ever been, or whether
it's
it's
the
lower
lowest
for any
rating for
president.
any president since polling began.
Yeah. I see. Yeah, it just seems blindingly obvious that that'll be the case. But we have been fed so much stuff by Trump that we almost begin to believe that this man is impenetrable. It doesn't matter what he does. Shoot a guy on Fifth Avenue, he'd be applauded for it. We're nearing the end of our time, chaps. Are there any other things you'd like to, any others, like a confession, anything else you'd like to tell?
You're coming
Well,
across like the priest all right there, Jude.
Yeah, that's it.
Nothing could you confess, but I'm very comfortable that Canada made the right decision. I think in different times, in different political situations, we may have had a stronger NDP because there is a lot of progressive thought in Canada. Always remember that NDP and Liberal parties vote together has always outranked the Conservative vote. There are more progressive thinking people in Canada than Conservatives always have been. What has not always happened is an alignment together to defeat the Conservatives. That happened this time because of one issue.
Good. Pat?
well, I think Mark Carney is actually a light in the darkness. I really genuinely believe that. And I like the way, the way Starmer went over and kowtowed to Trump and various other people, including our own Taoiseach, whatever. Carney has refused to back down big time. China, and I never thought I would say this, China's the attitude of the president of China as well is remarkable. And I think what's going to happen, Gabriel and Jude, is that the BRIC countries allied with Europe and various other, I think we're going in the next maybe decade, we're going to see a serious swing away from America.
Yes, a realignment of trade, I think. Forced,
Yeah,
very often has happened, forced on people and actually working out for the good in the long run.
yeah.
That's what I
Mm,
like to think. Anyway, I think Trump, he's got
mm,
all the elements of somebody who's going to destroy himself. Right, guys, the time's
yeah.
up. First, especially Gabriel, thank you very much for taking the time. And we must come back to you. We're referring to you as our man in Ottawa. So we'll have to tap into your
Havana, Nirvana.
yeah. And of course, Editor McArt, as always, is a
I
fount of
We'll
wisdom.
see you. Well, Jude or Gabriel, best of luck in Canada, and I think Canada's a light